Hello guys and girls, and welcome to today's lesson. As you can see here on the screen, today we are going to be participating in yet another grammar lesson. And this grammar lesson is going to be focused on a new type of punctuation that we haven't talked about yet this year called the ellipses. If you think back, we've talked about punctuation quite a bit. We went over lots of different rules with using commas. We've talked about dashes and hyphens, and now we're adding a new one to the list. And like I said just a moment ago, this is called an ellipses. Down at the bottom of the screen is what an ellipses looks like. It's literally just three dots put together. I have added the parentheses around it just so that it would kind of make it stand out here on the slide, but understand that an ellipses is just a dot, dot, dot. I'm sure that you've probably used that in your own writing before, or you've definitely seen it used in other forms of writing. So we're going to be talking about when we should and when we should not use this type of punctuation. With that being said, as we go through the slides today, you should have a note-taking sheet in front of you, and you should also have a pencil. So if you don't have one of those two things, the note-taking sheet or a pencil, I need you to pause the video right now and take care of business. Get your note-taking sheet, get your pencil, and then we're going to dive in here and get started. Before we go over the 4 different rules to follow when using an ellipses, we're going to take just a quick second to talk exactly about what an ellipses is. Ellipses is actually a Greek word, and in English, the word ellipses means omission. Omission is something that we take out, and it appears, like we said previously, as 3 dots. Period, period, period is what an ellipses looks like. So if we're going to use an ellipses, we're using it when we have something in a sentence or a part of a sentence that needs to be omitted. Remember, omitted means taken out of the text. You guys are going to notice that there are a few different words on this slide that are underlined and written in the color red. That's because those words are important and need to be added to the blanks on your note-taking sheet. So go ahead and take a moment to do that. Pause the video if you need to, and then when you come back, we're going to be talking about the 4 rules to follow for using ellipses. Let's dive into rule number 1 and rule number 2. Rule number 1 says that an ellipses can be used to omit, remember omit means take away, a lengthy section of a sentence or a paragraph. Rule number 1 could be really helpful for you when I ask you guys to cite textual evidence. Think about when we're using the ABE writing strategy or when we're writing an on-demand. I often ask you guys to cite textual evidence, and sometimes there will be maybe a sentence or a group of sentences together where there's information at the beginning that's really important and there's information at the end that's really important, but maybe you don't necessarily want to cite multiple sentences, or maybe it's a really lengthy sentence. You can use rule number 1 with an ellipses to help you with that. So let me show you an example. Down at the bottom, we have a sentence that says, later that evening, after eating my mother's lasagna dinner, we watched the Goonies. I want to take you guys back in your mind to when we were talking about the rules of commas. And one of the things that we discussed when we were talking about comma rules was non-essential phrases. Remember, we said non-essential phrases are parts of the sentence that we could take away and the sentence would still make sense. This sentence that I have for you has a non-essential phrase in the middle. So let's pretend for some reason I needed to cite this sentence as a piece of evidence and I wanted to omit or take out that non-essential phrase in the middle. I would do it like this. Later that evening, notice that's how the original sentence starts. Then I add an ellipsis, a dot, 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 and then I pick up at the end. We watched the Goonies. I took out the non-essential phrase in the middle, but I need to communicate to my audience that there was more information there. I just chose not to include it. And we can do that with this punctuation here, the ellipses. As you're copying down this example on your notes, like I've said every time we've done a grammar lesson, please make sure that you are copying the example sentence exactly like you see it on the screen. We want to make sure that we're using our punctuation correctly, which means we need to have correct examples written in our notes. Notice, like we talked about with dashes and hyphens, there's not a space before or after the ellipses. It connects the words together, so make sure your notes reflect that. Moving on to rule number 2, in informal writing, an ellipsis can be used to represent a trailing off of thought. So when we say informal writing, I want you all to understand that this would not be something we would do in like an Abe or an on-demand, because those are formal. But if we were writing maybe a fictional story, or if we were writing a note to our friend, those are things that would maybe be a little more informal. And so that would be a situation where we could use rule number 2 to show an ellipsis that indicates a trailing off of a thought. It might look like this. If only I had ellipses, dot, dot, dot. Oh well, better late than never. It never tells us what this person is thinking. If only I had what? The thought trails off, and so we indicate that with our dot, 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 with our ellipses. Please make sure, like I said just a moment ago, that you do copy these examples exactly like you see them on the slide. Pause the video if you are not finished copying down rule 1 and rule 2, and we're going to go ahead and move on to our next 2 rules. Rule number 3 tells us that an ellipsis can be used to indicate a hesitation while speaking. Hesitation means like a brief pause. And so an example of that might look like this. I didn't say ellipses, dot, dot, dot. Well, what I meant was, dot, 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 you know, dot, 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 I am sorry. You can tell that the person who's trying to say this really doesn't want to say they're sorry. They're hesitating. There's kind of a pause. They're trying to find the right words to say. And so we can use our ellipses to show that. Every time where they would pause if they were saying it out loud, we indicate that with that dot, dot, dot. Our final rule for using ellipses is that it can be used to indicate the passage of time. And usually if we see that in a sentence, then that ellipses is going to be in the middle of the sentence. For example, weeks later, dot, 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 my sister found out that she got the job. So we have this ellipses here to show that there was a passage of time, like it says it happened weeks later. And so we use that ellipses to show that passage of time. Like I just mentioned on the previous slide, you do need to make sure you pause the video, have everything that you see underlined and written in red added to your note-taking sheets, and please be very careful and make sure that your examples look exactly like they do here on the slide. And when you're ready, you can go ahead and move on to the practice questions. All right, this should look pretty familiar. We had some similar practice questions when we did our dashes mini grammar lesson. We are going to take a look at the directions together up at the top, and I do expect you, when I get done giving directions, to pause the video and actually attempt to answer these practice questions. You should not just be waiting for the answers to pop up on the screen. That's not beneficial to you. That's not helping you learn anything. So I'll recap that again in here in just a moment, but let's take a look at the directions together. Rewrite. We have seen that word a lot lately. Rewrite means to write again. So you are rewriting the example sentences. I did try to give you guys a little bit of space down at the bottom, but if you feel like there's not enough space there, rewrite your sentences on the front of your note-taking sheet or on a separate sheet of paper in your notebook. But you are rewriting each sentence and you are adding the ellipses wherever they are needed. And then you're going to identify the 4 rules that we just talked about, whatever rule goes along with that sentence. So I am going to read through these 4 sentences, and then you need to be pausing the video, rewriting them, adding your ellipses, and identifying the rule. Sentence number 1, 2 hours later, we left the park and went home. Mom, I'm sorry for breaking your vase. That was number 2. Number 3, my grandfather, who will be 75 on his next birthday, loves to go fishing. And number 4, it's just that sometimes I feel like, never mind. Now would be the time for you to pause the video, rewrite the sentences, add your ellipses, identify the rule, and then when you are ready to check, you can hit that play button again. Here are the correct answers that I was looking for on those practice questions, those practice sentences. If you notice that you answered one incorrectly, now would be a great time to correct it. Number 1, 2 hours later, we left the park and went home. So in number 1, we are using rule 4. Rule number 4 told us that we can use an ellipses to indicate the passage of time. And since 2 weeks have passed, we are showing that with this ellipsis that connects later to we. And again, that's rule number 4. Number 2, Mom, I'm sorry for breaking your vase. Number 2 is where we use rule 3. Rule 3 told us that an ellipses can be used if there's hesitation in a sentence, and we talked about how hesitation is like a pause. It kind of shows us that maybe the person who is speaking might be feeling a little anxious or a little bit nervous about what they have to say, and so they kind of pause to gather their thoughts. And so we see that right here between and mom. Our ellipses is connecting the H in to the M in mom, and again, that's rule number 3. Number 3, this one should actually look pretty different from the original sentence. I'm going to go back for just a second. The original sentence said, my grandfather, who will be 75 on his next birthday, loves to go fishing. Number 3 has a non-essential phrase in the middle, like we talked about with rule number 1. Just remember that we did say with rule number 1 that if we want to omit or take away something, a part of a sentence or a paragraph that is a little bit lengthy or not essential, we can do that with our ellipses. So when we put it together, after we take that non-essential phrase out, we end up with my grandfather, loves to go fishing. And again, that was rule number 1. And last but not least, number 4, it's just that sometimes I feel like never mind. We see rule number 2 used here. Rule number 2 told us that we can use an ellipsis to show a trailing off of a thought. This person begins to say something, but then they never finish their thought, and so we indicate that with this ellipses between like and never. And like I said, that is rule number 2. Please make sure that you have all of the sentences copied correctly. You were asked to rewrite them, so I'll just say that again really quickly. Make sure you have all of the rules identified, and I would like to see your notes when you have them completely filled out. So go ahead and bring those to me, and then you're done with this part of our lesson for today.